Hey, it's Sarah. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you've probably thought about starting your own, right? Well, Podcast Launch Prep Week is officially open and we've got 50 spots available. Join me and a bunch of my friends December 8th through 12th. 5 days to map your strategy, plan 6 months of podcast content, and lock in your actual launch date. Plus, you'll be doing it alongside other business owners who are ready to stop thinking and start launching. It's $99 fully credited toward your launch package. Registration closes December 5th. Head to podfoxmedia.com to grab your spot before they're gone. Let's turn that idea into a launch date. Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. This is a big, brave one today. I know that kind of sounds counterintuitive because they're all big and brave, but I think for me, when I'm practicing this all the time, having the big and brave conversations in business, what I'm noticing is I start to lose patience for conversations that aren't big and brave. But I think that also means it feels easier to have most of these conversations. But some of them definitely take me out of my comfort zone. And you've heard some of them already this season. This is one of them today. And so I want to take a minute just to honor the folks who are here having this conversation live and who are willing to be big and brave about this together. Also, for you listening, because listening is still definitely participating and engaging in this conversation. I just appreciate it. So just want to take a second to honor. Before I open the big question, let's do a quick round robin of who's on the call, and we didn't predetermine an order, so we'll try to do this in a sensible way, but I'll start. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Sarah, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I also run a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox.
Hi, I'm Shireen, and I have a small handmade knitwear business. I also host a YouTube channel and mentorship programs and creative business retreats for outdoorsy creatives.
Regyna Curtis. I'm a soul rhythm amplifier. So I work with motivated visionaries to create businesses that feel like home and work like magic by really helping you unify your business structures and just everything about your business so it really reflects who you are and how you are most supported.
My name is Monica Henderson, and I am a genius activator, which is a fancy word for saying I help people with their organic intelligence and self-automation so that they can say it with their chest, live life to the fullest, and live healthy, wealthy, and fulfilled.
Love it. I'm Erin Perkin, and I am an accessibility educator. I teach people how to build accessibility into their business beyond just your website. So email, social media, event, podcast, all of that good stuff, because all of that needs to be accessible to everybody.
Thank you. Welcome. And honestly, welcome back, because everybody here has been a guest before, and that's so fun. I love the return conversations. This is going to be really good. So the big question today is, how does tokenism, quote unquote, differ from true inclusion? And how can businesses do better?
So tokenism is tough. This is a big, giant question, right? And I think most of us here would qualify as a token in most rooms in regular corporate America, to be honest. And as a person who has kind of been the only in the room often, the only girl, the youngest person, the only Black person, it is a blessing and a curse, right? And so I think this conversation is going to be like interesting in that to get the opportunity to be the token is one thing, but then the pressure of being a token is a different thing. And so how I think we can do this better, I think it's just going to be, it's literally going to be a big conversation. So I'm glad you're bringing this up, honestly. I mean, it is difficult. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur now, so I don't have to worry about this as much. I am not the token. I work with all weirdos. So all of the weirdos that are in my world, don't make, we were all tokens in some room, right? But now when I think about like other communities that don't have that diversity, I think it does put a lot of pressure on the person who is the token to educate everybody in the room about not being horrible people or like to not misstep. And anytime I've been in the room as the token person, I did kind of take that as my responsibility to educate people on a better way to interact with people who they are who could be in my position in one of the, what is it, triple minority of it all, right? Like in one of those areas, because ultimately when it comes down to it, it does, I may have gotten that position because they were like trying to be diverse, but what you didn't realize is you hired a genius and you hired a badass, and you hired someone who's more than capable and more than wonderful. And so anytime I was in those positions, I never let the fact that I was a token stop me from showing how awesome I am. But it does have a weight to it that I think this conversation is really important to have.
I love that. So I am token in a way that you can't see it because I am deaf and blind. So I feel like I can come at it from two different perspectives. In corporate, I agree with Monica. I would probably hire as a diverse hire in terms of like, oh, we haven't had a deaf person. We might as well use that on the team rather than hiring another male person. And that, but at the same time, finding that being a token mean that you also have that responsibility of setting it up for success for future people who come after you. And that can be tricky because half the time you are literally fumbling and trying to figure things out yourself too. It's like, for me to get access to be able to talk on the phone, I need to have a relay service like connected in, but there's firewalls at corporate. And then it's like, oh, well, you need to figure this out yourself. Why do I have to do that? That's the frustration. Now, in the entrepreneurial world, the token kind of become different. It's like, oh, I am the only person that speaks on accessibility. I am like you. That's where I get the token, and my mindset often goes like, well, I don't necessarily feel like I deserve to be in this position because I feel like there's so many other better people that can speak to that. But I've also been told, well, why not you? I'm like, well, because sometimes I think maybe someone who has a, a different skin color than I do, that also has the same disability as me, deserves this position better than me. But why? That's what I've been asked in the past. So it's like a very weird position to be in. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll be the token, but at the same time, I don't want to because I want to like open the door for other people. But you need to be able to find that position of being comfortable with being the token person.
Thank you for sharing. I resonate so much with what everyone is saying. And I was almost afraid to come on this call because I was like, I don't like I've always been tokenized. I also am like, I don't really know what to say about it because I think the hardest part is, or at least in my experience, a lot of it has been diminishing my own tokenism and saying things to myself like, oh, well, I'm marginalized, but these people are being even more harmed by the systems and by the world. And so I can diminish my own marginalization or tokenism because whatever, whatever, whatever. And we always make these excuses. And then down the line, things happen where you're like, wait, I need to actually acknowledge, confront, and stand up for these things that are tokenizing myself and just being open and being able to speak about them. And I think, especially in the entrepreneurial space, and it seems like all of us got into this for a reason. We are creating these accessible spaces. We are creating a chance for people who have been marginalized to feel less alone, even if that's the only thing we're doing, and to just being there to be an example and to share our experience is enough. And I think sometimes, like what Erin was saying, why me? Who am I to speak on this? And looking around, it's kind of like the more people that are speaking up on it and sharing their experiences, the more it's out in the open and the more people can start to learn or unlearn or just change the ways things are done.
Yeah, I totally resonate with a lot of what you were just saying there. And at first look at me, you may not think like, how is she a token ever? Or how does this resonate for her? Right. But as Erin, like you said, a lot of times the things about me that would make me a token are not things that you can see on the surface, right? Like a lot of times I've been the only queer person in a room, and that's not something that is going to be blatantly obvious unless I use some words about it, right? Don't walk around wearing rainbows all over me. And like, it's just a part of who I am, but it does give me a different perspective. And it gives me a value in that perspective. And it's actually what I've been thinking about while each of us have been sharing is, if you know me well, I like to think about words and the origin of words and what they actually mean. And a token, right? When you use a token as a physical thing, right? It's either a symbol or it is a way to exchange value. And so a lot of times tokenism is seen like from an external position and an external perspective as, oh, well, we're going to put this token person in this position, right? And we're going to put a spotlight on them as a token, as a symbol of something to represent. And I think this is kind of like bringing back to Sarah, the heart of your initial question, right? Like, how do we make sure that it's not just from like a surface level, right? And I think that is unfortunately a lot of times the way things start in a lot of companies, right? It's like I do remember in my corporate world having a lot of conversations about like, make sure you're showing diversity in the photos that you're choosing, and make sure that you're like, when you're hiring, that you are looking at that through a diverse lens. And sometimes that needs to be the first level of accessibility to just expand the awareness of something. But at a certain point, you have to integrate that into who you are, how you show up, how you do business. And that's where it really turns into the value, right? So having someone on your team who isn't a native English speaker as their first language is going to help you understand the areas that you have, the opportunities that you have to clarify your language, right? Having a diverse team of people from different backgrounds is going to help you understand things from a broader perspective, challenges that different people are experiencing, right? Like Erin, when you were saying like, is this my responsibility to make sure that I have this level of accessibility, or is it actually your responsibility as the business to ensure that all are welcome here? So I think that's really where things shift.
Yes, this is a fascinating introduction to this topic from each of you. I think because I sort of led this off, and even when I invited some of you in, I said, like, I don't feel equipped to have this conversation by myself. Like, and I think that is a great example of, yeah, I mean, I definitely have been the only woman in the room, and I've definitely been invited because I'm a woman and they need a woman's to be represented, right, in order to check a box. I've also definitely been the youngest person in the room. Trying to think of like a specific example when I've been invited because I was young, but definitely it's been called out like, oh, this is so valuable that we have a like millennials perspective here or whatever. So certainly I've had those experiences, and I do feel very strongly like, to kind of capitalize on what you were saying, Shireen, and then kind of what everybody has sort of said. And Erin, you suggested this too, of to a certain degree, I'm a palatable diversity hire. I'm a palatable diversity choice. I don't have to make anyone uncomfortable that diversity was let into the room, quote unquote diversity. And I think that feels like very fake diversity, because I don't think that I offer diversity in a checkbox kind of way. And then that gets into a bigger question of, what is diversity beyond the checkbox? Because certainly, like, all people bring their own unique perspectives, and I definitely try to make an effort to expand my perspective. I do feel very strongly, especially if I am the only woman in the room, I feel a huge sense of responsibility to not just represent like white women, but to try to represent people who are not in the room, just because I do try to have these conversations and nobody else in that room is trying to have them. Like, so then I feel like I have an obligation to try to offer some kind of representation of perspectives that are not present. And it's hard. And I think, to your point, Regyna, about the business's responsibility. So this is interesting. So when I wanted to have group conversations, or even just have guests in general, even one-on-one, I'm like, it's important to me that it's not an echo chamber of the same people who look the same and have the same bodily experience going through life and have similar perspectives. Like, it's important that we have diversity in all ways, right? And how do you do that without accidentally tokenizing, like, oh, we really need a Black perspective on this. Who do I know who's Black, who I can invite? How do you avoid that situation and trying to create a culture and a network and a community that is actually already inclusive so that people opt in? I didn't invite a single one of you because I thought of you as somebody who would offer great perspective. I made the opportunity available and asked, does this resonate with anyone who would like to participate? I just happen to have diverse friends to invite, right? Like, that's a good thing, or this conversation would look different. But yeah, that's a hard thing to do as a business owner. Like, how do you do it without tokenizing? So anyway, that's what came up for me.
Yeah, somebody's got to be a pioneer. Somebody's got to be the first one. And diversity begets diversity, right? So, like, I know tokenizing, and I know, like, they're like, oh, you're tokenizing, or you're like, even a loose diversity hire, like you were saying, Sarah, like, I'm the most palatable version, right? But you're deadly, because you're a Trojan horse, right? You're going to get in and you're going to change people's minds. You're going to alter conversations. And then when it's your turn to hire, you're going to hire me and Shireen and Erin and Regyna, right? You are absolutely the Trojan horse, right? And so I think we need to get away from actually being like, oh, well, they're tokenizing, and say, no, 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 they let us in the back door. They had no freaking idea what they just did, right? Like, you just opened the floodgates. And a lot of the times I end up being the pioneer for other people. And I always say that I'm going to run through the brick wall, right? And I'm going to make a Monica size hole. And it's your job to crawl through the Monica size hole. You don't have to go through all of the like pain and suffering and anguish that I did to break open this opportunity for you. Your job is just to walk through that and take advantage of all the opportunities on the other side of the door, right? So in a lot of ways, yeah, like they may be doing it for the wrong reasons. It's one of the conversations that people have all the time about like Facebook or these different platforms, and like, these billionaires are making all this money off of us. And I was like, no, 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 no. What I do with the tool that I'm given from a jerk is what's the most important thing here. It's not what the origin was, it's what I do with the opportunity that's in front of me. The Volkswagen was made by Hitler, right? But that's the history. Are we all banning the Volkswagen? No. But has the Volkswagen created memories and opportunities and lovely, lovely spaces for people all over the world, and have brought happiness to everybody? Yes, because at some point someone said, I know this has had a bad origin, but I'm going to take it and I'm going to make it my own, right? And we all have that opportunity. If you get the opportunity to be a token, don't complain about that shit. Say, yes, mission accepted, right? Like, yes, challenge accepted. You want to diversify? Let me show you what diversity looks like. It looks like me and my friend Shireen and my friend Erin and my friend Regyna and my friend Sarah and my friend Matt and my friend Jorge. Like, it looks like all of us, right? And in the moment, I have to stand for all of this. But once I get an opportunity to bring in the person who has the right set of skills for the job at hand, and I don't care what they look like, my job is to give them that role, right? And that's the only way that we're going to break down systems. It's the only way that we're going to get in there. Boycotting and avoiding is not the way, but going in and infiltrating and actually making the changes is the way. I've always been the, if not me, who? If not now, when? Right? And I have had that since I decided I was going to live out loud when I was 12. I have decided that, like, I'm just going to show up and do the thing and, like, let everybody complain. But if you complain about it and you're not doing anything about it, just shut up, right? Just shut up. Like, go in there and be the person, be the change that you're looking for. And I think all of us have done that in our own businesses. We've all created spaces for other people to feel safe, to be themselves. And this is, if you're listening, this is the rally cry, right? This is the dog whistle. It's your time. It's your time to actually, you see a change that needs to happen, step into that role, be the token, be the only person, right?
Monica, I'm so fired up right now with everything you're just saying. Yes. If only people could be watching us, we're all just like dancing back here. But it made me think so much about my own experience in my small mountain town. I live in a very small mountain town in Colorado, and it is a town that a lot of people say is not diverse. And I'm usually the only Asian person in the room or the only Asian person in town. So it's kind of like, yeah, Shireen's the one for this. I mean, there are more Asian people than just me, but very few. And it's just funny because we always talk about how it is actually a hidden diversity that we have in this community. There's just not a lot of places where people are included. And we have this amazing organization. I'm just going to plug it because I have seen this happen in real time in the last few years, called the Steamboat Dance Theater. And it is a local adult dance community where we put on a show every year. And it's very white, of course. And over the years, more and more people have come to join this dance community. And my friend Juanita, she started putting together a Latin American piece every year. And she was like, I'm just going to start creating this piece and people will come. And I'm always in her piece and I love it. But it's one of those things that it's like, like you're saying, Monica, until you show up and are visible and there, a lot of this diversity is hidden in the woodwork. So this tokenization is almost like we are in this pioneer phase of it. You know what I mean? And it all starts with our own communities, and there are ripples in everything. And this just echoes back to this other conversation that we had on the podcast before, but it's all about communities and ripples, because once we start the ripples, it keeps going. And I love your Trojan horse analogy because it is so true. Like, we get into a room and like people have literally said to me like, "Oh my God, you don't even have an accent." And I'm like, duh, I don't. Sorry that I was born here and raised this way. But it's kind of like people just make these assumptions, but then you kind of surprise them. And whether that's a good thing or bad thing, it initiates a conversation. And for a lot of people growing up in rural communities who have not had exposure, maybe this is the first time they've seen an Asian person that doesn't have an accent. And then they're like, huh, that's a possibility. Or it's like, oh, I see someone that does have an accent, but it's not because they just don't know how to speak our language yet. It doesn't mean that they're any less capable or any less anything, right? So it just all starts with exposure and the one, and in our smaller local communities. And we are building our own as well.
I love all of this. It's just like making my brain spiral. My brain has been spiraling all week long. And I'm like trying to like stay focused. It's interesting. So I started my business 7 years ago. I can't do math anymore. 7 years ago. And like honestly, what I often thought when I started my business, I didn't want the bro business. I was like, but then on the girl side, it was like girl bar, all pink. And I was just like, oh good Lord. Like where do I fit into this? So I would just be like, well, I'm just gonna interject myself into this because might as well start somewhere. And then over the years, I feel like I've started finally seeing more diverse people, more diverse women in the online business world. And I was like, yeah. And I'm like always like rooting for everybody else that is different because like that's how I grew up. In the deaf community, like we had all races in the deaf community since I was 4 years old. It was never like all white kids. It was like we had Mexican, we had Black, we had Asian, we had all of them. So to me, diversity was just like so ingrained in me. So when I enter a community that is all white, it really becomes uncomfortable for me. But I figure that's my way of I get in and then I can bring everybody in there to in the how you say that word infiltrate. I can't. It's hard for me to pronounce them because like to show people that we all need to be with people that are not like us because it makes our world that much better. So if I'm the token, I will be okay with that as long as I can make changes happen.
Sarah and I were like fighting over who's going to speak next. I think that's such a beautiful statement that you said, right? If I'm the token, then I can make the change. And I want to just kind of agree with and build off of what everyone's been saying here, right? About like that one brave act, right? One brave choice. And I think that there over the past many years, it's really been many years, there's been a lot of pressure on social media of these like, there's a trend, and this trend is in service of this particular level of diversity or this particular group of people or this particular thing, right? And if you don't do that thing as a business owner, then you're not supportive of diversity or you're not supportive of whatever, right? But quite honestly, like we can't be involved in every single trend all the time and also running a business at the same time and having a life and having families. What I think is more impactful than that, and not to say that that doesn't have a place, it absolutely does. However, what's more impactful is how you actually show up, right? Who are the people that you're having on your podcast? What are the actions that you are taking, right? And those one brave move for you might feel like that's not a big deal to somebody else because they're already doing that, or they don't see the significance of how brave it actually is to show up in that way, to say that thing out loud in a room of people that clearly don't understand that way of being, right? Just actually saying in a corporate boardroom sometimes, like, I'm doing this with my partner, right? Like, I remember being asked to fly to Australia and I was living in Philadelphia at the time, right? Can you fly to Australia and be there for 3 months? And I need you to leave next week. I was in the midst of a move and I was in a room full of men who were the breadwinners in their families, who all had wives at home and children, right? I didn't have any children. So it was one, oh, she doesn't have any children. So she must be able to fly to another country on a whim. But I'm not married to my partner, right? But what I said in that moment was, I can fly to Australia and I can do it after I finish moving, right? We were moving from Philadelphia to Chicago. And for me to say that, and then the words that came out of my mouth, like there was shock on their faces, but then they were like, oh, I get it, right? Because I was like, if I do not help with this move, I will be getting a divorce, right? And they were like, there was confusion first because they were like, wait, what does that mean? Like, how do I reconcile that, right? How do I understand that? And I was like, Would your wife be happy about the fact that that she has to move your entire house and your family across the country all by herself while you fly off for a work trip? Oh, no. Okay. That's the situation, right? Like I have to actually, yes, it's important for me to do this thing in my business. And it's also important for me to contribute to my household. And so I can say yes to you and also no at the same time. And that was so courageous in that moment, right? It felt so courageous for me to sit there facing all these men and say that for so many reasons. One, saying no to them when they were all more important than me on paper, right? Also, sharing something really vulnerable about myself and setting that boundary and yeah, all of it just felt really courageous. So in that moment, that was important.
So I know, Sarah, you encourage us asking questions, and I actually want to ask a question of all of you, which is, has there been a moment in your own journey where you were the only in the room and you felt like that was a disservice? And when did you then realize that it was actually the superpower?
Ooh, it's funny because I started attending a conference 3 years ago. I was the only deaf person. I had an interpreter. Like I had to specifically ask for an interpreter. It was weird because I noticed it right away. I was like, okay, I don't have long blonde hair. I don't have I'm not wearing neutral colored. I was wearing bright colored access and I was like, oh my God, I stick out like a sore thumb. But I started using that as my superpower because I'm like, if I'm the first person with a disability that they meet, awesome, because now within their brain, they're gonna remember me. They're gonna remember, oh, I remember Erin. She's that deaf person that I met. Like, and I'm making a podcast. So now I'm gonna make sure I have transcripts because I want her to be part of that experience and learn from me. Because that's when I realized that I have a superpower in the fact that one, I acknowledge the privilege that I, as a deaf person, can speak. I can show up to podcasts and be a guest and speak. I have friends that cannot speak. If they want to be on a podcast, I will go out of my way and be like, I'm going to bring her on and be like, I want her to be a guest because she is a brilliant person. But I'm also making it and it is a superpower that I can speak. But I'm also going to make people aware that not all deaf people can speak, but we're all really smart people. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I love this question. It's making me think a lot, and I'm like, I don't know, but I kind of thinking about it now, I'm like, I never consciously did this. I never consciously felt like the only, even though I always was the only. And so the example I thought of was even just starting my business. I started off as a knitting side hustle that grew into a full-time business, and now it's become a community. I host creative retreats, I have these mentorship spaces, and my branding, though, was always me doing things in the outdoors. And so this is not even necessarily from my the color of my skin or being a woman, but it was like knitters are indoorsy and quiet and very subdued. And here you are wearing loud colors, dressing up in costumes. You're like a 37-year-old riding bikes in the desert with your buddies wearing tiaras and stuff. What are you doing? But I always just portrayed these things about my life and my experience and who I was and what I was doing. I never necessarily highlighted different things that made me different. But now that I'm moving into this, hosting these creative retreats and doing these mentorship programs, it was like those people are like, I didn't think I could be both and. I didn't think I could combine all of my multiple identities and passions into something that felt like me. I thought I had to fit into this box. And I think a lot of the time we do put ourselves in a box, or whether it's a stereotypical box or a box based on a niche. But the reality is we are so many different things, so many different components. And I think oftentimes people just are more comfortable with boxes, like whether you yourself in a box or people looking at you in a box. And until you can just break through that, no matter what it is, right? You kind of don't realize what your power is. And so for me, it just really brought up this whole being Asian in the outdoors and doing all these outdoor activities that I don't see a ton of other Asian people doing. And there definitely are, it's just not as represented. Seeing people who are, seeing people my age who don't have children. Like, I don't have kids and I don't want to have kids. Being a maker and a crafter, but also being adventurous. Like, all of these different things can just make us who we are. And when you share about them and when you talk about them, people are like, oh my God, I agree. Like, I feel the same. I'm less alone and all this stuff. So I think it's just being who you are and all parts of that.
So interesting, because what I was going to say earlier when Regyna and I were duking it out actually is super related to this. And I would say when I learned, yes, I've certainly been the only woman in the room, but when I've learned that that was a superpower is today during this conversation. So I'll just be like really transparent about it. So I probably as a like young person really aspired to be like, put me in the room where there are no women. I want to be a trailblazer. I'm going to break glass ceilings and whatever. And I'm cheering on all the other specifically women, right? Because that's the kind of marginalized identity that I most relate to of I want to see more women break through like male spaces. But pretty quickly that was exhausting and also very like made very clear that spaces that are full of men where I'm the only woman and women have not been, they're not built for me. And being you talked about this a little bit earlier, Monica, of like being the person who goes in and then it's you have the responsibility for trying to make changes, especially when you're also super young, is really hard. And it's a losing battle a lot of the time. And so I kind of stopped putting myself in situations where I would be the only anything. Like I look for spaces where I feel like I fit. And so even what you were describing, Erin, of like if the people in the room sort of all have a certain even vibe, like they all wear clothes that I don't necessarily align with, the color scheme doesn't necessarily align with me, like I just don't really put myself in that situation. And instead, I also specifically seek out rooms where diversity is a priority. Like I don't want to just go learn from more white men. I feel like I've spent my whole life listening to white men. And so I don't need to, I feel like I've learned everything that they have to teach me, which is not fair. And it's not true. I actually have some clients who are white men who I think are extremely intelligent and I like them as people, like, right. And business owners. But I have that kind of, I don't read books by white men as a general rule. I don't go to spaces that are like led by them. I wouldn't apply to a job if the board was all white dudes. Like I just wouldn't. Even when spaces, actually, especially when spaces are led by white women, I ask a lot of questions to be like, what kind of space? Listen, like as a white woman myself, I don't really need to be in a space for white ladies. Like I'm not going to grow or expand there. I'm going to be comfortable there. And I want to grow and expand. That's a priority for me right now. So it's interesting because kind of what I'm learning in this conversation is like, there's so much benefit to me getting to be a Trojan horse because not only can I get in there and I will be more easily accepted than some other people might be as the only person that's checking any kind of diversity box because you don't need to make most any other accommodation for me. I benefit from all the same systems and structures as most white men, right? So I have the ability to go in and then actually question things and push for structural change so I can invite all my friends and they'll actually have a safe space there. And I think that's the thing is like, I hear from men in my life who talk about like diversity hires, not so much now in the direction that this United States is going, but when that was a governmental priority, right, in business, that they'll make diversity hires, but then those people have really high turnover. They don't get promoted. And sometimes I've even heard men complain that their results are worse. And really, what is very easy to look at and see is like, well, the structure's not there to support anybody but a certain kind of person. So to be able to go in and be a person who can function in most of those environments without accommodations or understanding or whatever, I actually could go in and make structural changes. That actually could be a superpower. And that is like a huge step forward for me in understanding what the opportunity is for this. So thank you for asking the question. I learned today.
I love that. I was today years old when I learned this. I I love this question too. And when you asked it, I was like, what is my answer to that, right? And immediately I remembered something, or I had this awareness of what when it was, but I had to really think about like how did it become a superpower? And then Sarah, when you started talking, I was like, oh, I think I understand it. So maybe I was also today years old. In my corporate career, in the portion where I created educational travel programs all over the world, one of the main markets that I worked with was China. And I went to China a lot. I have spent a lot of time traveling around in China. And I was there to work with the staff for a very particular skill that I had. But what ended up happening, in addition to me going and doing those trainings internally with the team, is they started inviting me onto these tours, I guess, not like a tour, like a travel tour, but they would invite me to go to these meetings, like tours of meetings to go to schools and talk with like city officials and school boards, and it's slightly different structure, and but I wasn't ever asked to speak. I would be hauled around from city to city, right? Like it was me and the team of people. I was the only white person. I was the only woman. I was the only American. It was a international company. And so I would be brought to these meetings where I would be introduced, and I would sit and smile and nod and not understand a word of what was happening. And it was like I was the only, for sure, in many ways, in a bunch of different rooms. And at some point I asked, why do you have me come on these tours? Why am I in these meetings? Because you never asked me to contribute anything. In fact, you never even asked me to introduce myself. Like there could have translated for me if I were to have something, but I was literally asked to just come and sit there and smile. And I was like, interesting, right? And when I asked that question, they said, because you're friendly. I was like, what? Why? Like, it took me a while to understand, like, okay, it was like, I thought I was asked to be in this room because I actually run these programs, right? And they would, or at least they told me, because I didn't actually, I don't know, right, the language, and I couldn't speak or translate what was happening, although my coworkers would summarize it for me afterward and kind of give me the highlights. But they would, yes, exactly right. So just sit there and smile didn't sound very nice, but because you're friendly, right? And they were like, you are here to represent like the friendly face of the American, right? Because it was an international company. And so they wanted me to come along to literally be just like the friendly face in the room, even though I actually was the person who was creating these tours. I was the mastermind behind them and also the operational support for them. I was creating the academics of them. I had contributed so much to it, but I was asked to just sit there and look friendly. And so I didn't, when you first asked the question, I was like, have I been in that space? And then what is the superpower of that? Like, how did I learn that that's my superpower? What I actually learned about that being my superpower is not as much about me just being asked to sit there and be the smiling, friendly face, but it was about my ability to into situations where I am the only, to travel to different places and to understand different cultures and to reflect on my experience in that and how much I learned from that and how I can then take those experiences where I am comfortable or willing to go somewhere and have an experience and then bring the insights of that forward to someone who might not actually be comfortable to do that thing. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that was my reflection on it. There's some reflections there.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is, so I asked this question, but I was actually born an only. I'm the only girl. I have the only girl in my family, and I am actually most comfortable when I'm the only. When I'm in a room full of people who look like me, I feel the least comfortable, right? So like when Shireen was talking about being the only Asian kid, I was the only Black girl in my grade, in several schools, right? Like, so being the only is actually more comfortable for me than being in a room full of people who are similar. With that said, there was a point in which I wanted to be like everybody else in the room as much as I possibly could, right? Because I didn't want to ruffle feathers. I wanted to kind of like be like everyone else. And I kind of always looked around like, how come I'm always the only person who looks like me, right? Like all of my friends, my daughter has aunties and uncles because all of my friends are her aunts and uncles especially when she was younger, because we don't do adults by first names thing. And she would be like my auntie Pan, who's Cambodian, and my Thea B, who is Mexican. Like all of my friends have always been like not looking like me. And one day I was walking and someone said something to me and I had no idea that this person actually knew who I existed. I like walked into the room and they were like, Monica. And I was like, how does this person know me? Like, I've said nothing, I've done nothing spectacular. Why do they know me? And that was the moment that I realized that because I don't blend, right? Because I don't look the same as anybody else in the room, that I have a natural calling card, right? Like it's an automatic, it's the Black girl. And originally that would seem like that's like derogatory. It's like, oh, it's the Black girl in the room, right? It's the token person. But for me, at that moment, I realized it was like, oh, I don't have to try that hard to stand out. I already stand out, right? Like I'm already different. I'm the one who looks like me that comes to this voice. And so when I was creating the next conference series, people would say, oh, well, but I don't look like this or I don't look like that. And I was like, well, we have the same message, but it's important that this message comes out of your mouth, right? It's important that it comes out of your mouth. It's important that it comes out of my mouth. It's important that it comes out of different mouths, because the only way that someone's going to resonate is if it's coming from someone who looks like them. And so the more that we have people who have the same feelings, but are delivering it in their own unique way to the people who will resonate with that message the best, I think the more this concept of diversity is actually going to be embraced, right? Because somebody needs to hear it from my face, right? Even though Regyna and I literally, Regyna and I have the same exact message. We talk about it all the time. We're two sides of the same coin. We work a lot together. And we will say exactly the same thing. And some people will hear it from her, and some people will hear it from me, even though we have both talked to that same person. They won't get it until it came through that vessel. And so I think, if anything, especially for the listeners, if you are feeling like you want to fit in, use my language, fuck that, don't. Like, go ahead and stand out and be unique, because I do think that you need to be the person in the room that looks like you, that says that message, so that it can resonate with the person who wants to hear it from your mouth, who wants to hear it from someone who looks like them, feels like them, who's adventurous. Shireen, when you were talking, I was like, I know a young lady who needs to talk to you today, because she is a young, outdoorsy crafter who is Asian. She's Japanese and white American. And she needs to talk to you. She needs to see what that looks like, because you are the avatar for her, right? And so I think, if anything, if this can come from this conversation, it really is about, like, doesn't matter if you're a token or not, the fact that you exist and you are who you are, and you're the weirdest in all the weird ways that you're weird, and you let your freak flag fly, that's going to attract people into you, and you're going to be so valuable. That value exchange that Regyna was talking about earlier, that value exchange is important for everybody. It's important for all of us.
So I have a couple of thoughts. I'm like trying to think, but I'm also trying to listen, and hopefully the dog next to me won't bark. One of the things that I always bring this up. The world is truly designed for the straight, heteronormative, able-bodied white male. Just simple as that. It is true. And then the other thing is, like, I can relate to Monica because, like, when I first started my business, I would literally ask the interpreter to join me to go to networking event so that they could see that I was signing, and like they're like, oh. And then they would see me at these events again, and they're like, oh, that's Erin. She's the one with the interpreter. She's the one who's signing. Like, I didn't have a problem with that because I want to make that impression. But I also want to share this comment that someone asked me. They're like, well, why aren't you creating a community or an event for just disabled people? Because I want to sit at this table. I want a seat at this table because I have my community of deaf friends and people that I love and adore. But I also want to sit at this table. That's like where I'm at now. Like, don't tell me to create something just for disabled people. I want a seat at this table where everybody's different.
I had so many thoughts from Regyna to Monica to Erin, and it is like all circling and swirling in my brain right now. But with what Regyna said, and being the only in that type of situation, I always feel this way with travel, right? And I talk a lot about travel in my business model because that's one of the things I do. I'm traveling with people. And part of it is when you're the only or when you're in a situation that is uncomfortable because you're not familiar, because you don't know the language, because you don't look like anyone else or whatever. It's like it just creates so much more empathy and compassion to come back and be like, oh, what is that person in my community and how are they feeling? Because that's how I felt in that situation. And in my community, I feel totally safe and secure. But for someone else, they might not be feeling that way. And now I know what that feels like. So I love what you were describing there. And I think that is truly the power of diversity, is just having that compassion for each other and everyone's diverse experiences. And then going back to what Monica was saying, like, being the only and then also being uncomfortable when you're in a room with a lot of people that look like you. I was like, oh my God, I totally have had that experience. And what it confronted for me, though, which is so horrible, but it was kind of like this confrontation of my own internalized racism that society has put upon me, where I was like, well, I'm different than those other Asians. And it's like, oh my God, why am I even thinking that way? Like, I had to spend so much time working through that and processing it and just realizing, like, this is what society and the systems have impressed upon me from the time I was a child, because being like that, I'm doing air quotes, was somehow not cool or not good or not great or whatever. Or like the model minority thing where you have to be this like submissive straight A lawyer or doctor or whatever. Like, I'm not that. But also, and then circling to what Erin was saying, and it ties into what Monica said too about why am I not creating a space for outdoorsy Asian people? Well, I am an outdoorsy Asian person that also is creative, and I'm here. This is a space to create a space for just being together. I'm not saying it's not for Asian people. I'm saying it's not exclusively for Asian people, but maybe if they see someone like me and resonate, then it's like what Monica said, then it's like, oh, I can do that too. But it's not because it's being a space created for Asians. It's because it's a space that I've just created from things that I want to do. And I don't want to say just and diminish all of this because there's definitely room for those types of things. Like we have months dedicated to celebrating different marginalized communities because not that they shouldn't be celebrated all the time. It's more like this is an extra opportunity, and this is how I view it at least, an extra opportunity to really highlight and celebrate as a whole. But how do we incorporate that all the time in all the things? And it's not even something you think about. It just is, right? So yeah. Oh my God. So many thoughts. But thank you.
I love this conversation, and I appreciate so much how safe of a space we've cultivated here where we can share some really vulnerable and transparent things. And I think also ask questions and dig in. And I think that's really everything that I would hope that Big Brave Business would be. So I just want to take a minute to thank you so much for that. These conversations have always been important. They are particularly important with the cultural shifts that are happening and the political shifts that are happening in the United States right now. And of course that implicates the whole world. And I know it's not only the United States that's experiencing kind of this tug of war, but certainly the United States likes to be the best at things. And that's hate is one of the things that has, and anger is certainly one of the things that the United States is trying to get a trophy for right now. All the more reason I think having spaces for us to be in community where we can have conversations like this is so, so, so valuable. And I heard some of you say that maybe in approaching this conversation with the topic, like there were some curiosity, hesitation, wondering how things might go, what would happen. And I personally am just so grateful for what has happened on this call and in this conversation. So thank you for that. And to you listening, thank you for coming on this journey with us. I want to reiterate, as always, that everybody's information and links and everything like that is in the description and the show notes. I personally feel like we could keep talking about this for 2 more hours, but obviously we're not going to do that for the sake of this being a tolerable podcast episode length. So if you want to keep having conversations with these people, because of course you do, you can connect with everybody in the description. To reiterate, I just appreciate so much that you're willing to be here, being big and brave with me multiple times. Thank you for coming on. I've said this a couple of times today, but I'm going to keep inviting you back until you tell me to stop inviting you. I love all of you and I want more of you. And so, yeah, so plan to continue to receive those things from me unless you're like, nope, this is my last one, in which case let me know and I will respect that. But yeah, thank you. And to you listening, really, really want you back too. So please meet me here next week. Same time, same place. I'll see you on the next episode. Hey, it's Sarah. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you've probably thought about starting your own, right? Well, Podcast Launch Prep Week is officially open, and we've got 50 spots available. Join me and a bunch of my friends December 8th through 12th. 5 days to map your strategy, plan 6 months of podcast content, and lock in your actual launch date. Plus, you'll be doing it alongside other business owners who are ready to stop thinking and start launching. It's $99 fully credited toward your launch package. Registration closes December 5th. Head to podfoxmedia.com to grab your spot before they're gone. Let's turn that idea into a launch date.